Welcome to the Not Old Better Show, Smithsonian Associates Interview Series on radio and podcast. The show covering all things health, wellness, culture, and more. The show for all of us who aren't old, we're better. Each week, we'll interview superstars, experts, and ordinary people doing extraordinary things, all related to this wonderful experience of getting better, not just older. Now, here's your host, the award-winning Paul Vogelzang.
Welcome, everyone, to another powerful episode of the Not Old Better Show, Smithsonian Associates Interview Series on radio and podcast. I'm Paul Vogelzang, and today, certainly we are diving into one of the most timely and explosive, eye-opening issues, conversations that we have had in some time. You just hear it in my voice. This is going to be a fascinating program coming up on Smithsonian Associates, and our guest today is going to be able to answer the questions for us about, well, have you ever worked your fingers to the bone only to feel like you're standing still? You are not alone. In fact, nearly 40% of Americans now say they're failing to get ahead despite working hard. Here's the kicker. Many of us, especially those of us over 60, were raised to believe that success was a matter of effort, perspiration, grit, determination, the perspiration part of the American dream. But what if that dream is actually a myth? My guest today, journalist and author, Smithsonian Associate Adam Chandler, will be appearing at Smithsonian Associates coming up, and the title of his presentation is 99% Perspiration. Does America's work culture still work? Check out our show notes today for more details about Smithsonian Associates, their links and details about Smithsonian Associate Adam Chandler. But we have Adam Chandler today. He's here to blow the lid off of the work hard, get ahead narrative in his brand new book available at Apple Books, 99% Perspiration, a new working history of the American way of life. Smithsonian Associate Adam Chandler argues that Smithsonian Associate Adam Chandler argues that what we've been sold about work, opportunity, and success may actually be hurting us and dividing our country. Adam Chandler takes us coast to coast, from fast food fryers to Fortune 500 execs. Adam Chandler was a former working bartender, and he's had a chance to reveal a nation at war with itself over work. We'll talk about the gig economy, loneliness, political extremism, and how America stacks up against countries like France and Denmark, where people work less and live more. If you've ever questioned why the grind is glorified, why retirement feels further away, or why we tie our worth, our personal worth, to our work, this conversation is for you. Buckle up. This isn't your grandfather's idea of the American dream. This is 99% perspiration, and it might just change the way you see your job and your life. Please join me in welcoming to the Not Old Better Show, Smithsonian Associates Interview Series, Smithsonian Associate Adam Chandler. Adam Chandler, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, congratulations on this wonderful book. I'm going to talk to you today about 99% Perspiration, as well as your upcoming Smithsonian Associates presentation. I'm looking forward to this conversation. Thanks for sharing the book. Congrats on just a wonderful book. And I hope you are well, and we can just jump right in if you're ready.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
All right. Well, why don't we start kind of at the start? Maybe tell us a little bit about your upcoming Smithsonian Associates presentation. Just briefly hit the high points and how you'll use Zoom to engage our audience. We're all on Zoom these days, but I think it'd be nice to just start there, and then we'll move into the book and to all this other great stuff that you do.
Absolutely. Well, what I'm most looking forward to in terms of Smithsonian Associates as a program is I've been doing these book events all around the country, and it's been wonderful to engage with people and have good conversations. And they've all been events where I have a moderator or somebody participating in a conversation. But I haven't yet done the thing which I did a lot for my first book, where I kind of got to call up images and historical anecdotes and particular reference points, and also just research that I did to kind of illustrate a different side of the book, which is a little bit more of the I wouldn't say academic or rigorous parts of it, but it brings to life things that it's harder to kind of convey in a conversation. So I'm really excited for the visual component of it and using Zoom to bring some of those stories to life, some of the figures and charts and graphs to life, and the old great archival material to life, whether it's Benjamin Franklin or the Columbus or points in American history that illustrate our fascinating work culture.
Helpful. Thank you. That's great. Again, I know this is going to be exciting. Let's talk about the book, of course, 99% Perspiration, A New Working History of the American Way of Life. You focus on that really famous quote and the perspiration part of it. And it really is kind of offset a little bit in the reading throughout the book, because you focus on this idea that perhaps hard work isn't the big guarantee that it once was. And certainly for my generation, I'm 68. We knew that if we wanted to get ahead, we could do that through putting our shoulder to the wheel, and really, making something happen. That's not necessarily the case any longer.
Absolutely. And that is something that I think is at the heart of a big disconnect that we're kind of grappling with right now.
Yeah.
It was and felt a bit easier to get ahead a few decades ago.
Yeah.
And it's been difficult to kind of reckon with what about this moment makes it so challenging to have that classic American social mobility and um, movement through the social classes that I think we once were more able to do, and also we just love to talk about. We love to embody this story, this American greatness of being fluid and dynamic as an economy and as a society. So I think that it's at the heart of a lot of the difficulty that we're dealing with right now socially in the moment.
And so often the case, again, certainly with my generation, but other generations too, we value a career almost over family and friendship and even marriage. What does that say about us? And how did we get here to this point?
Yeah, it's a great question. In large part because I think a lot of sociologists, I think a lot of community leaders are wondering this too. If you look at perhaps Robert Putnam's work, since Bowling Alone, or some of the big sociological movements around third spaces and people gathering together. We don't have these ready-made community institutions that we used to have, whether it's church or synagogue or civic organizations. I mean, Smithsonian is a great example of something that we could use more of, where people get together and share ideas and have the opportunity to meet new people and having these exchanges. And I think work has really replaced that, and the data backs that up around how much we do work and how we view work as central to the meaning of our lives has kind of supplanted what we might once have looked around to our community for, to our family and friends for, to our neighborhood. We're spending less time with friends than we used to. We're spending less time with family and in our community than we used to. And work has really rushed to fill that gap, whether it's staying late at the office or just having email on your phone and being available for work needs or just the opportunity to be a bit more productive. We've fallen a little bit into a trap of it, and it's something that has a social cost that's worth exploring.
Yeah, in the book, you describe modern work as being akin to a secular religion, and 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 so I wonder if you'll tell us a little bit about how dangerous is it to place our faith in kind of this idea of the hustle of just making sure to get ahead. We all hear these terms about the gig economy and how so many of us, as we're getting a little bit older, want this, kind of second act, or we might need that second act in order to buoy up our retirement finances. But it impacts us emotionally and physically and then secularly. spiritually.
Absolutely. It is. It's a real challenge for us collectively to have a system where there's so much emphasis on the individual, and that is a beautiful part of being American is that you can have this American dream if you work really hard. That's the myth. That's the article of faith. But the reality is that a lot of people are working really, really hard and not getting it. And instead of looking at what's making it so difficult to get there, whether it is the cost of living or healthcare or education, all of these different facets of life that are making it so much harder to get that American dream, we're focusing on individuals. We're saying, if you're not stable or steady or happy or successful, it's on you. It's your fault, or you're not working hard enough. And that the answer is to continue working even harder to get there. And there's a real problem and a danger in focusing so much on that work identity as a way to become successful. In part because if you don't succeed here, you're meant to feel like you have failed. It is a matter of character to not succeed in American life. Whereas in other countries, they have these built-in safeguards and social safety nets that are a little bit more supportive of people who run into trouble, whether it's having to drop out of school to take care of a sick family member, or becoming a child care or adult care minder in a family, in a household, taking care of your kids or grandkids while their kids are off at work. Whatever it is, there are these obstacles that we don't provide support for, and it's important to look at those because that's part of the challenge of getting by right now. It's not for lack of trying. It is often for a lack of infrastructure that makes it more difficult to succeed here. And we should be looking at those because we could support people better and benefit economically and socially in all of these different ways.
In your reporting in the book, you talk about there's some pushback going on, and I wonder if you talk a little bit about where you saw that regionally, and perhaps, and even generationally, even kind of older workers versus younger workers, people pushing back a little bit against the grind, and how that's kind of coming together, and is that perhaps a precursor model for change ahead?
I certainly hope so. I think that there's a lot of recognition and sort of broad understanding that the old, admittedly beautiful and very seductive idea about hard work giving you and providing for everything you need in this world has fallen by the wayside. I think that we believe in it less because the reality of it is less. American workers, for example, have grown 64% more productive in the last 40 years. But their pay has only increased by 17%. In that time, the economy has more than doubled. And so that money has ended up in the hands of other people. Not everyone has prospered from this. And it's important to look at that. And people who are working hard and asking, I've been told my whole life, I need to work hard.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I'm doing that and I'm not getting ahead. It incites a crisis. There's a lack of faith. There's an anger at institutions, at our politicians. It's easy to find scapegoats in that moment to say, this is why I'm not getting ahead anymore. And it's important for us to sort of look into that pushback and say, what can we actually do to make this idea true? Because there have been points in history where it has been truer. And we need to fix the balance because everyone's very upset about the lack of opportunity and equal access to success that has emerged over the last few decades in particular.
Please stay tuned as we talk with author and Smithsonian Associate Adam Chandler about his upcoming presentation at Smithsonian Associates titled 99% Perspiration, Does America's Work Culture Still Work? We'll be right back with Adam Chandler after this. Hi, this is Paul. Before we jump back into today's show, I want to take a moment to recognize a truly special milestone, Smithsonian Associates' 60th anniversary. Since 1965, Smithsonian Associates, the largest museum-based education program in the world, has been inspiring lifelong learners with unforgettable experiences, connecting audiences with the Smithsonian's museums, research, and experts in new in exciting ways. This year, the celebration is for you, with a full year of special programming both online and in person, from behind-the-scenes looks at Smithsonian collections to conversations with astronauts, historians, filmmakers, and curators. There's something for everyone. Smithsonian Associates has created something extraordinary. I'm proud to partner with Smithsonian Associates to share their incredible programs with the Not Old Better Show audience. Thanks for being part of this journey. Here's to 60 years of curiosity, learning, and discovery. Our guest today is author, writer, Adam Chandler. Has written this fantastic new book, 99% Perspiration, A New Working History of the American Way of Life. Smithsonian Associate Adam Chandler will be appearing at Smithsonian Associates coming up. Please check out our show notes today. We've got details about Adam Chandler, his new book, 99% Perspiration, and of course, his upcoming Smithsonian Associates presentation. Adam's joined us today. We're talking about his book and that presentation briefly. The book is fantastic. Again, congratulations, Adam. I want to get back to this idea that, we just do value career over family and over so much. And I wonder, within that, how does this idea that you are your job fuel loneliness and disconnection and so much of this kind of red and blue and disparate kind of nature that we're kind of undergoing as a country, and particularly, we see in my generation a great deal of loneliness already. Is this driving it even further?
Absolutely. The more that we work and the more that we find meaning in our work means the less we find meaning in our friendships, in our communities, in our families, and that is driving a loneliness epidemic that the former Surgeon General made a point of calling out an epidemic. It's meaningful to say we really are spending less time with each other, and we need to look at the root causes of that. And work and the need to work is a huge part of that. And the pressure around it, and the pressure around feeling good about yourself and success is another thing that makes it difficult to want to be out in the world and social. If you feel like you're falling behind, it makes it hard for you to connect to others. It makes you feel vulnerable in ways that we need to be better prepared. And that is something that community leaders and sociologists and academics and all kinds of just neighbors and friends are trying to find solutions to these problems. And so work really has filled this gap that our old civic organizations used to take, and religious groups used to sort of coordinate, and all of these basic facets of American life that made us very tight and you neatly, neatly bonded to each other. Harder to sort of conceive and to benefit from. And work is something that is driving that change away from it. And I talk to people in the book who are finding themselves in these roles of being not just members of their community, but trusted confidants for all kinds of problems. We really make it difficult for people to just essentially be a religious leader or a police officer. These are people that I spoke to in the book who have their basic duties and then find themselves an ear or a shoulder to cry on for a lot of stressing and difficult conditions that more social structure and infrastructure would help solve. And we're asking a lot of people to kind of carry this weight for a system that doesn't seem to be providing the stability that it once did. And it is something that we are trying to understand right now, in part because a lot of the anger that exists in America right now comes down to this loneliness and isolation. And the need to be productive and the need to feel useful, especially at a time where we are more sort of polarized politically and economically separated.
Among those that you spoke with, talked to, who has more wisdom on this subject? Who has a a better grasp and perhaps even more acceptance about this? Or is it the one percenters, or is it the rest of us that are kind of dealing with this, kind of on the ground almost?
I would say people dealing on the ground have a pretty good understanding of what I think a lot of political leaders and industry leaders don't have access to, which is that the struggle is very real, and that we're seeing it kind of unmake our communities and make um, marriages and families less cohesive and functional. It's making our communities weaker. It's making our politics more toxic. And all of these factors are things that I'm talking to someone who is a pastor in Alabama. I'm talking to a school teacher in Indiana, talking to a construction worker in Wisconsin. I'm talking to a veteran in California, and they might not all agree about everything in terms of politics. I'm sure they all voted for different people and have very different beliefs. And I came to that understanding pretty quickly within a few minutes of speaking to them. But when you talk to people about what they think a good life is or what they want ultimately out of their lives, there's so much overlap there that transcends these partisan. And that's really important. That's actually something that gives me a lot of hope. And what I think is special about that idea is also that's a trope within American life. The founding fathers, if you dig back into the history, they didn't all get along. They weren't united. They had a lot of suspicious feelings towards each other, a lot of outright animosity toward each other. And they still managed to find a way to make a workable American government come into formation. They found ways to make their differences part of system of governance so that everyone felt relatively safe. And it wasn't perfect, but the compromise was there. And I think that that's something that we can look back to and say, it hasn't ever really been perfect, but we've always found a way to understand each other or respect each other. And that's something that I found traveling around, even among people who I disagreed with or who disagreed with each other. There is a basic essence of what people want out of their lives that is universal in a really powerful way.
You talk about this. You talk about this idea of the dignity of work. And when we look at job creation, we look at the numbers behind some of that. Often they are reporting low end wage kind of jobs. And for those of us who are kind of on the ground, are we finding some dignity in this work, in these jobs, despite low wages? Is there a correlation there?
It's more difficult than ever to find a good job, and since post-war America, the makeup of the workplace has kind of atomized in this way. You have more gig workers who don't have basic rights or basic safeguards, whether it's paid sick leave. I worked as a bartender for a number of years when I was starting my writing career, and I had the great experience of getting to talk to people and work in small businesses. But I also knew that some of my coworkers, if they weren't feeling well, they had to go to work anyway because no one could cover their shift and they needed to make their rent. And that's not a system that you want to have. That's not safe for everyone. And those are just small examples of it. And the gig economy has come into focus and sort of replaced those old jobs that we used to talk about, 25 years and a pension and a gold watch. Those days are gone. But even the basic kind of stability of having a good job is more elusive than it's ever been in terms of the last 50 or 60 years. And it's important to ask why, but it's also important to acknowledge that it's happening, because there are some people who are still saying, if you just, as you said, put your shoulder to the wheel, you will get there. And it's not for lack of trying that people aren't getting there. And we really have to hone in on that understanding, because that's where the change happens. It's everyone looking around and saying, we know this isn't working. Let's find a way to make
America as a country and its great love of work and all of this history that we have in that subject is different than our international contemporaries and partners across the world. And you cite France in particular about having this law that is a right to disconnect law, and that Denmark has a 37-hour work week. Why is it that American workers are expected to sacrifice? Just as you said in the previous answer, if somebody's sick, they're still expected to go into work. And sacrifice their health and perhaps sacrifice happiness too.
Absolutely. Well, I want to be clear that I don't think that we should become France or Denmark. I'm
Yeah.
not saying that those models are perfect, and that's something that I think is important because we have our own approach that has been very successful. We've accomplished great things by working hard in America. However, there are some cultural norms that exist in other places that I think we could adopt. France's right to disconnect isn't a law where people are not allowed to work late or respond to a work email or a text message or a Slack, whatever the technology is after hours. It basically just says you need to find a working a working dynamic with your employer so that everyone is on the same page about what it means to work um, after hours and require or ask for or have an understanding of what you're responsible for in terms of being on call, needing to respond to things. If it's an email at 11 o'clock at night, you're not obligated to respond to it. It's just somebody sending something out. And I think that those are the things that would help people prioritize their lives more because you can relax. You can spend time without looking at your phone, worrying that you need to respond to something. And these are just cultural norms that create a sense of what the guardrails are between work and life. And as a result, France is a really nice example of a country where, again, they have their drawbacks for sure. But if you are working at your desk at 8 o'clock at night, it's not something that's seen as the classic American. You're showing your commitment to the company. It raises a question of whether the company doesn't have enough workers or whether the person is in the wrong position. It doesn't have this heroic ring to it. It is more suspicious than anything. And it's important to think about that. Why should you be at your desk at 8 o'clock? Shouldn't you be with your friends or with your family or socializing? And what does it cost you to not be doing those things in pursuit of work or company glory? And those standards that exist in other countries are meant to create those boundaries that I think do benefit. And that's something that shows in data. They're constantly studying why workers are just as productive in Europe as they are here in the States by and large. And Denmark is more productive than we are in terms of hours worked and income per capita. But they have essentially these built-in safeguards that make workers more creative, more loyal. They stay at their companies longer. They feel more rested and relaxed because they take the time off from work that they need, which is a huge part of the reality of American life. You feel nervous almost taking your vacation days, and almost 50% of Americans don't take all the days off that they are given, which is wild. And so it's again something that we need to drill down and understand why we're not encouraging people to take the time off they need. And in large part, it's because they feel like they can't. And that's again, not a recipe for a good worker. It's not even about the personal. It's about also the bottom line of a company. It's about if you're a shareholder, you want the workers to not leave the jobs because that costs the company more than it would have them stay and be creative and loyal and getting the most out of it.
Thank you, Adam Chandler, for joining us today. I knew this would be a wonderful conversation. Again, congratulations on the new book, 99% Perspiration, A New Working History of the American Way of Life. The book is available now. You will be speaking at Smithsonian Associates coming up here very soon. Please check out our show notes today for more details so our audience can learn all about you and learn all about the great book and all of your great work. And I'll just say selfishly, as you do more work on this subject or others, we'd love to have you back, Adam. It's just been a pleasure talking to you. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. This is a real treat. And I'm looking forward to my event with Smithsonian Associate.
My thanks to Smithsonian Associate Adam Chandler for his time and generous answers to our questions. Smithsonian Associate Adam Chandler will be appearing at Smithsonian Associates coming up, and the title of his presentation is 99% Perspiration. Does America's work culture still work? Check out our show notes today for more details about Smithsonian Associates, their links, and details about Smithsonian Associate Adam Chandler. My thanks to the Smithsonian team for all they do to support the show. My thanks to you, our wonderful audience here on radio and podcast. Remember, be well, be safe. Let's talk about better. The Not Old Better Show on radio and podcast. Thanks, everybody. We will see you next time.